We don't have to, Ty.
If you want it.
Tay, thanks for being on the show, man.
Hey, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, so you're not new to the show. You've been watching it?
I've watched every episode.
Awesome. You haven't missed a one yet.
Not one.
Which one is your favorite episode so far?
The vodka testimony.
Very powerful.
Very powerful, very moving. Yeah.
You know, this podcast is a platform for everyone to share their story. And a lot of times we don't know what that story is when we have people come in. You know, we've heard stories or rumors that, hey, this person's got a good testimony. And when they come in, a lot of times we'll leave the studio going, wow,
Yeah.
that's why God has allowed us to have this platform. And so we hear that you have a story. You know, you and I go back about 41 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're family.
Yep.
And just tell our listeners and watchers a little bit about yourself. Who is Taylor Whitaker, and where you come from, your upbringing, what has made you you?
All right. Taylor Whitaker. I am married to Sheena Whitaker. She's my Lucy. Everyone who knows her knows she's a little crazy, but she's fun. I have a 25 today is his birthday. Yes, 25-year-old son, Cameron.
Happy birthday, Cameron.
Yep, and he's a assistant GM at Menards in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He's up there with his lovely wife, Riley, who we're just very thankful for. But, I grew up in a family with 4 siblings all together and a mom and dad. My dad was a minister and was a pastor at one point in time. We lost him, it's been 18 years, I think now. Wow. He's been gone. So just an awesome upbringing, very encouraging parents. Always told us that God had a plan for us, always was there for us, encouraging us, correcting us when we needed it, you know, just typical family, you know. And we were very blessed to have, you know, a family in that kind of atmosphere, growing up in that kind of atmosphere, having family and parents that supported you and encouraged you. And, you know, miss him a lot. I miss him a lot.
So you had a drug problem that was different than our other guests.
Yeah, I was drugged to church Wednesday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and whenever else he was preaching, wherever else, you know, as a kid. So yeah, but I don't regret it at all, though.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about start our journey here. I was thinking when you took over your dad's church, what did that look like when you were in the process? Like when God started speaking with you, what was going on for you to have that opportunity, and the pros and cons of taking over a church?
Okay. Yeah. Well, my dad, I remember getting a call from my mom. I was at work, and she said, "Hey, I'm taking your dad to the hospital." I'm like, "Well, that's not right," because my dad normally doesn't go to the hospital. And so that started a process of 2 weeks and 2 days. That by the time they found out what was wrong with him, he lived 2 days after that. And so, you know, growing up in my household, one thing my dad always would say that, you know, God has a plan and purpose for everything he does. And, you know, we don't question God. We, you know, even though, you know, it's okay to do that, but, you know, it doesn't do any good because God is God and he's going to make those decisions. So we went through the process, you know, of the funeral and everything, which was just blew my mind away how many people came. They were parked down the street, downtown, and walking up. And so it just showed what kind of impact he had. So after that, I was driving to work one day, and I was seeing God say, "Oh, God, what am I supposed to do? I mean, what do you have for me? What am I supposed to get out of losing Dad? And what is your purpose for me in this point in time? What do I need to do?" And I remember exactly where I was. I was south of 114, passing the golf course. At the time, it was Highland Hills,
Which is now Waldo.
it was now Waldo. And I heard him say to me, "I want you to go to Huntington and take over the ministry." And so I came home that night and I told Sheena, I said, hey, hon, we need to pray. We need to see God what he wants us to do. But I feel God's telling us we need to go to Huntington and work in the ministry there. And she's like, no, at first. But,
Because you're living in what, Warsaw
we're
at the
living in
time.
Warsaw at the time. Yeah, we were very involved with our church. We were the youth leaders there, and we were working with young adults. And so we started to pray. So we said, okay, let's pray. So we're not gonna talk about it for the next week. We're just gonna pray. And so we started praying. So we started asking some of our good close friends to pray for us. And so my wife experienced it first. She talked to her friend and she said, hey, we need you to pray for Taylor and I. We got some decision to make. And her friend, the exact words that came out of her mouth were, what? About him going into ministry? And that was like the first, like, okay. And then she talked to another good friend of ours, and she said, we need you to be praying for Taylor and I. And she didn't say anything. And she said, you know what? I need to tell you about this dream I had about you guys. And when I walked in, it was a church, and Taylor's behind the pulpit preaching. And we're like, okay, God, what are you doing here? What's going on? And so then we had a couple other confirmation, people just calling us out of the blue. And so we decided to go. And it was a big change for us. Ended up moving to Huntington, took over the ministry, and it was a big change for us, definitely. She didn't even change her jobs to be closer to where we're at in Huntington. For a while, she actually drove to Goshen from Huntington, and it was crazy, her doing that, but that sacrifice she made for us to do ministry. And I'm very appreciative of her for doing that. And so, yeah, we go there, and it's different. I mean, taking over a ministry of someone who, to me, was like, a superhero. I mean, he was just an awesome man of God. I mean, the way he would present the word to people, he could talk to anybody on any level and really impact their lives. He had a servant's heart. Different pastors have different giftings. Not all pastors are like true blue shepherds. Some of them are really good preachers. Some are really good teachers. Some are really good with administrative things. My dad was just he had like that pastor's heart for people. He was a servant. He was the type of guy that, when the need was brought to his attention, he was bound and determined to, just fill that need. He would go to church on through the week to study, and people would stop by the church, and he'd have money to go get milk afterwards, and he had to go back home and get milk money from mom. She's like, well, what are you doing? He said, well, somebody came out of the church today and needed some money. And there was a family that had kids that said, hey, we really need bunk beds for our kids. They're not sleeping. They're sleeping on the floor. Well, that moved my dad so much that he went out and got them all. By the end of the day, found the bunk beds. And not only did he find the bunk beds, but he found every one of the kids a bicycle. So taking over something like that is
those are big shoes.
It's a big shoes to fill. And sometimes you feel the pressure of that because you're trying to live up to who he was. And so, over the years, the process, you have to learn that you're never going to be that person. You have to be who God's called you to be, who he's designed you to be. So that's kind of what the start of it was. It was getting over there and, people start comparing you.
Yeah, that's my first thought is your ministries, I mean, your preaching styles, was it similar? Was it different? Your operating of the church, was it a huge adjustment for the people of the church for you to step in?
Definitely preaching style. My dad was changing. He was evolving a little bit in his ministry style. He was going to schooling. He was actually in his last year of schooling when he passed away. And so God was he's growing in his knowledge more and more. My dad he didn't graduate high school. He quit, but my dad would spend 8 hours a day at the church studying. That's all he did was study the word. And I always told people I compare him up and put him up against about anybody when it comes to preaching. But but he was a fireball kind of preacher. He was pretty fiery and used to love hearing him preach. I can get excited, when I preach, especially, when you feel the presence of God, when you're preaching, you feel the people are getting it. It really, really pumps, it energizes you. But I wasn't that old school fireball preacher kind of like he was. I was more of more of a teacher preacher. So that style was a little bit different for people, and you lose people because, that expectation of what they want to see, it's not there anymore. And that's understandable. I never had any really harsh feelings toward anybody who left. If they felt like they couldn't be at the church because of that, that's fine. I'm not going to hold that against anyone. You gotta go where you feel God's leading you to go and serve where God's telling you to serve. And if you feel that difference makes such a big difference for you, then so be it. I mean, that's fine. But we also gain people. My style was a little bit different because, like I said, the educational side of things, how I approach stuff from doing ministry in other churches, how we approach the business side of things with the churches, and, trying to get things set up more organized, that type of stuff. That was something, we did. We did, but my heart's always been for outreach too. I mean, that's something I think Dad instilled in us a little bit, especially with what we went through as a family with my brother, and his leukemia he had, just helping people. So we were very outreach oriented, and we try to do that type of stuff. But yeah, definitely.
What would be your advice for someone that is preparing or possibly going to take over a church?
Well, first, make sure that's what God's calling you to do. You need to seek God. You need to seek people that you look up to, people that can mentor you, that you can go to, say, hey, I need advice. I need to pray with us. But you really need to seek God. It needs to be God needs to be in the midst of what you're doing. So I would say that's the first thing you need to do. You need to evaluate everything, what the impact's going to be on your family, what it's going to be upon, you might be, like we had to do, relocate. That all factors. But to me, the main thing is you got to seek God. You got to pray. You got to know His voice. Listen to what He's telling you to do, because if you don't, you're going to fail miserably. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Before we go any further, it is our thing here on the podcast to do an energy drink because Tyler is just in love with Ghost.
I've seen this, yeah.
And so
It's the Holy Ghost.
it's the Holy Ghost,
The
right?
Holy Ghost.
Yeah. So today's drink is the Ghost, and it's the sour pink lemonade, which I have not seen before.
Yeah.
And it looks great. It looks great, Ty. Great job.
Yeah, it's new. It's the new one. So
It's the new.
let me know.
All right. You gotta tap it? Because listen, I haven't done energy drinks in like forever.
It smells sour.
Does it?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Tastes like a Jolly Rancher. Tastes like yeah. Tastes like a strawberry Jolly Rancher to me. What does it taste like to you? Now, granted, I want you guys to know this is the first energy drink I've ever drank in like 8 years.
Really? Is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as your dad's church and how you took over? Is there anything you feel like people should know or be aware of if ever put in that situation?
Well, when you take over a church and you're bringing in your stuff, what God is calling you to do with the church and lead, it's praying and seeking for the right people to come along with leadership with you, training your people. Being a pastor is more than just getting up on Sunday morning and doing a sermon. You're taking care of your people throughout the week. You're answering calls. I used to get some crazy calls, middle of the night, midnight calls, say, hey, we need you to come. But, teaching your people, training your people, constantly pouring into your people, especially your leadership, because you want to maintain a healthy church. And sometimes I think a lot of times the body of Christ, especially I think in the American churches, there's a lot of unhealthy churches because we don't really pour into our leadership like we should, training them, teaching them. I always look at being a pastor as like being a coach. Your job is to, here's the plan, here's the game plan for what we're doing. You're the defensive coach, you're the offensive coach, whatever it is. You're the children's pastor, you're the youth, you're whatever you are. Here's our goal. This is our plan. Go for it. My job is here to help you any way I can, support you any way I can, encourage you any way I can, give you the means necessary to accomplish the ministry of the church. And not to be the guy who says, you got to do it my way or no way. Because when God brings people into ministry, they have that calling. I'm not a children's pastor. That's not my call. But there's people God brings in those positions that my job is to help them be successful, because when the ministries are successful, the church will be successful. So that's what we need to do as pastors. When we take over, whether you're taking over or starting a church, that's things you need to really pray about and seek and make sure that you get that mindset, because sometimes you can be in that position and your ego can get in the way. And that's where you start having a lot of issues with your church.
Let's talk about that, because you started a church then in Warsaw.
Yeah.
What's it take to start a church? I mean, what was that conversation with God at the time? You know, what led you to want to start a church, and what are some of the hurdles and things that you faced in starting a church out of nothing?
Well, when we were in Huntington, God one day spoke to me, says, it's time to move. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like move this from this church building or what? And I didn't realize that he was talking that, no, we're literally going to move. And that was weird. I mean, because I never thought we'd ever end up back in Warsaw, quite honestly. I figured if God ever moved us somewhere, it would be outside of Indiana. And so we decided to come back to Warsaw. God was bringing us back to Warsaw. My mom was still kind of the overseer of the church. She was still technically the overseer, and I was just taking on the role of ministering. So when we came back to Warsaw, we moved back to Warsaw. Originally, we had actually tried out for a church, and that didn't work out. And it was a God thing, definitely. Because when she and I were done with that process, we sat in the car out in the parking lot. We're like, okay, God's got something. We're doing something different here. So we started out in our house. We had a house, and we just met. Basically, it was family we started with, and then through just divine connection, we found a building. And if you know in Warsaw, it's hard to find buildings.
Yeah.
And if you find a building, it's ridiculously expensive. So we just happened to have this connection, and she worked with us, the lady who owned the building, and got it really reasonable. We started growing. At one point in time, we had quite a good group of people coming. There's a lot to it. I mean, but there's things in my heart that I want to do as a ministry is different, because when I started the church, my ultimate goal was to not be the typical church that I grew up in, because it's about reaching people any way we can reach people, and not doing the same old,
So like non-traditional?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say non-traditional. It's more of, when we were growing up, a lot of times you didn't have to really go out and do a whole lot. People just came to church. Mm-hmm. Well, people don't do that these days. You have to go. Your ministry is outside the four walls of the church. And so you have to do things to reach people. People need to see Jesus in you, what you're doing. They need to know the realness of who people are looking for. Real these days. They don't want the fake or phony. They've seen through it. With the whole COVID things going on now, that's really changed people's perspectives too. I just didn't want to be like the same old, just go to church on Sunday mornings, preach, have a service, go home. Every now and then I wanted to do more. Now, the problem with that is there's still people saying, well, this is the way we've always done it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was battling with doing that part of it. So I felt I couldn't really do the ministry I wanted to really do. Because when you have leadership, you're trying to do things that you need to do, but then you have leadership talking at you saying, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. And that made it real difficult. And so I began to struggle a little bit with that. Plus, I felt like I was putting out fires more than I was being able to minister. And if you talk to most pastors, they can tell you they deal with a lot of
drama.
And I think, we might get to that at some point today, but it's that aspect I think people need to understand when it comes to their pastors, because they're just a person. They're just a human being.
It needs to be a checklist.
Yeah.
In order to call the pastor, you have to meet this criteria.
Well, I mean,
don't waste his time.
Yeah, I mean, but also just understanding who the pastor is and understanding that person standing in front of you is a human being, the same as you're, or a human being.
They're flesh.
They're flesh, and they deal with the same kind of junk you deal with. But not only are they dealing with their own kind of stuff, but they know everyone's junk in the church. People go through things. They come to the pastor. They talk to the pastor. The pastor sees all the stuff that other people don't see, and that weighs on the pastor because you hurt. If you love your people, you hurt for your people when they're going through things. You want nothing but the best for your people. You want to see God use them in an awesome way. You want to see them grow. You want to see them do great things for the kingdom. You want to see God bless them. God do things in their lives, in their families' lives. So there's a lot weighing on a pastor. They go through a lot. There's a lot of crosses they bear. There's a lot of weight they carry, and that's why I think today you see so many pastors who are burning out. The suicide rate in pastors are going up.
Yeah, that really bothers me.
It bothers me a lot, But I think if people truly would understand their pastor and truly have a different attitude towards their pastor in some respects, we can talk a little bit later on this one. I'll finish up what I'm going to say about that. But I do want to share a little bit about that, a little bit more. But just doing the ministry there was great. We had some people coming. We were doing awesome things, but I still wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. Like I said, I felt like I was putting out fires all the time and not actually being able to do the ministries I wanted to do.
That's got to be frustrating because
Yeah.
starting your own church. That your whole thing is this is my ministry. I'm going to be able to do what I want to do, and
Yeah.
it's got to be frustrating that you weren't able to accomplish what you really set out to do.
Right. Yeah. Because you're always, like you said, you're always dealing with things. Not to say we didn't accomplish anything, because we had some great things happen.
Yeah.
There's people's lives are changed. People that came to church that are serving God now because of things that happened in the church, because of what God did through the church, not what He did through me or anybody else, but what He did through the church. We're just an instrument. We're just a tool to be used for the kingdom. So, for what we've seen God do and what those people are doing now, it's great to see that they're moving forward and keep serving God and doing great things. But it got to the point that we were doing the church, and I was at the point like when we were getting ready to basically wind down the ministry. That last year, I went into a time of just seeking God because I was just so overwhelmed with so much stuff. And I'm like, God, this is not what I wanted to do as a pastor. I want to see people touched. I want to see people's lives changed. I'm just tired of constantly having to deal with this. I had some great mentors. I had some Pastor Kim Norris from Bloomington, Indiana. Awesome man of God. I could call him anytime. He was traveling the world, ministering in Africa and Puerto Rico and, all these thousands of people, but he would take time to talk to little old Taylor Whitaker, and so I would talk to him a lot. And, but I never told him kind of what I was praying for. I just started praying, God, there was like 5 questions that I was asking God. I said, God, I need these answered so I know what you want me to do. I really need, and I prayed. So the last 6 months, I was really getting to the point because my health was starting to fail. I was really, really health-wise, really sick. I didn't realize how sick I was until I went to the doctor. And they shared with me, hey, you got some major life changes you need to do, or you're not going to be around here very much longer. So I found out I was diabetic, and my sugar levels were like skyrocketed. And I was wondering why I couldn't sleep at night, and I wasn't resting. I didn't have any energy. But I remember sitting in my living room one morning, and I was just sitting there, and I wasn't really doing anything. I was just sitting there in the recliner, and I get a phone call, and it's Pastor Kim, and he said, "Hey Taylor," he said, "I just got back from." He was just in Africa. He just got off the plane from Africa and said, "I had to call you because I get it was so. You guys gotta know I'm a big teddy bear, but he said, God told me I need to call you and tell you this." And he went down every question I had and checked it. And I said, "Okay, God." And basically what he told me, he said, you go through things in life, and, it's like a horse. Sometimes a horse, it runs and it gets tired. And sometimes you got to put it back in the stable. You just got to let it heal. And I'm like, okay. He said, doesn't mean it's going to always stay there. He said, but sometimes it just needs a rest. And so we decided, okay, we're gonna stop the ministry. And it was a hard decision because, you as a pastor, you're like, you just keep going, it'll turn around. You have that, it's a selfish kind of mentality, really. If I just keep going, God will turn it around. And, You do more harm than you do good when you have that mentality, because it's a pride thing that comes in. You need to be humble, because we start to say, well, what will people say if you stop this ministry? Whether you say, well, he failed or they failed, And when we decided to stop the ministry, I had a peace come over me. I mean, just a literal peace come over me. And so my wife would, she just would ask me, said, do you think we failed? I'm like, no. Because going into what I would want to share to people is the success of a church is not in the pastor. The pastor can only do so much in a church. God gives him the vision. He lays the vision out. She lays the vision out. And God says, this is what we want to do. And if the people don't fall in line and say, we're going to support the vision of you're giving us, pastor, this is what God's given you, we're going to follow, the church isn't going to be successful. Because if they keep butting up against the pastor, keep fighting against the pastor. I just kind of sometimes want to remind people, God didn't call you.
Mm-hmm.
He called someone to be the shepherd of his sheep. And he just asked his sheep to listen to the voice. Listen to his spirit. Listen to what the pastor's doing. Because if the pastor's following what God's called him to do, you're going to be successful. As long as you stay the course of what the vision is, what God has given, you're going to be successful, no matter what he's calling you to do. And I think that's where people really get it messed up. And that's why I think a lot of churches are dealing with pastors that are getting burnt out, pastors that are unfortunately taking their lives because they feel like they're at the end of the rope. There's nothing more that they can do because they've fought, and they feel like they're not going to win. And so I stress to people, that you really need to remember, here again, that he's just a man, but God has called him or her to do what he's called them to do. So get behind them, support them, be proactive in the church. Don't be what I call a pew potato. Get up. Let that seed develop. Let that sprout. God has a calling for everyone. Everyone has a purpose in the church. Whether they might not think that, they might. Well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a preacher. I'm not any of those. If you take out the trash, that's a part of the body of the church. You're making the church be successful by what you're doing. What you do, whatever part you play, doesn't matter. As long as you're being a part, the church will be successful because you're being proactive. You're being said, I'm being a servant. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to being a servant in the kingdom. And no matter what God calls you to do, and he'll bless you for doing those. And then the church will be healthy. People will see things happening. It'll be on fire. Great things will happen. Great things will happen.
And so that's where you're at now. You're a servant under another pastor. Mm-hmm. What does that look like, being a pastor and being in that position where now you're a supporting role instead of that leadership role?
Oh, man.
I mean, what's the stable look like?
Well, you know what? When we stopped the ministry, we took a year. Pastor Kim told us that you just need to go visit churches. So we did. For a year, we did nothing but go. He said, I don't care the denomination, just go visit and see what's out there.
What did you find out there?
Well, let's just say God and I had a lot of talks. Because I questioned him a few times, like, why? We were trying to, and this was happening, and I go here, and it was interesting. There were some great churches that we really enjoyed, but like you said, each church is not for each person. See, you got to find where you fit and what works for you. So we went to some that I was like, we had like this thing with the family. We would go into the church, we would visit the church, and we would come out, we'd get in the car, and then we would talk about what we thought. And I was at the point for a while there, I would actually go home, we'd go to my office and type the pros and cons up about the church that I was at. And it was really interesting when I go back and look at the pros and cons that I had wrote on some of the churches. So we did that for a year, and then the very last church we went to, it was our aunt and uncle. They had been asking me to come all year long. My wife says, "Are you ever going to go visit the church? They've been asking you to come forever. Are you going to go?" I said, "Well, let's go this Sunday." So we went. We walked to the door, and the pastor, Pastor Anthony Green, had only been there a year. Actually, it was the year like that month. And we sat in the service, and it was just a great great service. Listen to him preach. I'm like, he had my heart for, people. And I just was clicking with what he was saying and talking to him a little bit afterwards. And so, the thing when you go to a church to visit, you're supposed to go 3 times, right?
Okay.
So, because not everyone has a good Sunday. Not every preacher has his best sermon on a Sunday. So you need to give them opportunities
That's
to
true.
really get to know what the church is about. So go visit. If you're out looking for a church, visit 3 times at least to give it an opportunity.
I know that's what the worship team's thinking, because we've had some Sundays where not everyone's there, not everyone's clicking. I was like, oh, we got visitors, but this is not a good one for them to hear.
Listen, if you talk to most pastors, we'll tell you, I wish they would have came on a different Sunday, because that was not, because, when you do a sermon, it's how people respond to it. You're feeling how people are looking at you, and how many people were sleeping in the pews that morning or whatever it is.
And then when they visit on a good one, you're like, oh, but the next Sunday is not so good. You're like, oh, we blew it.
But that gives people an opportunity to see that it's not always good. It's not always going to be like this big
There is
high.
no perfect church.
There's no perfect church.
You'll never find it.
You'll never find it. So, and people are always looking for the perfect church.
Yeah.
And so, it's very hard. And if you're looking for a perfect church, you're never going to find a church.
No.
And I think it's kind of an excuse people try to use. They always have these excuses for what.
But for the record, I would love to see that pros and con list for that church when you visited ours.
Oh, yeah.
When you said
that church.
I'd like to see the pros and cons on that one.
So we went back 3 times, and then we we think we could settle in here, and just because there was a lot going on. We saw a lot of potential in what. See, I look at from the pastor's standpoint. I look at the congregation. I'm a people watcher, so whenever we would go visit churches, I sat at the back of the church, and for the most part, when you guys come to your church, I know you guys. I'm comfortable with you guys. I could sit at the front, no problem.
Yeah.
But if I want to see what a church is all about,
you come to our church, you're getting a microphone.
Yeah, I know. I normally have to sing or something, but I sat at the back of the church and I just watch people. And I just see how they're acting with the sermon, how they're responding to worship. Yeah, how serious they are about their worship. Going to a church where most of the people felt like during the worship, I felt like I was at a concert, because everybody was just standing there. They were more involved with their coffee than they were worship. And there's nothing wrong with having coffee. I don't have a problem with that kind of stuff.
Coffee.
But I love coffee. But that's if you're more concerned about your cup being full rather than being full of the Spirit, God moving and doing worshiping Him, then there's a problem. But so what I liked about the church there was just the heart of the pastor, like I said, and I saw potential. That's something I thank God for. That and I thank God He sent my dad that way too, also because that's what my dad showed me. When you look at someone, don't see who they are now, see who they can be. And so when I look at a situation, I don't look at what it's like right now. I look at what it can be. And so when we went to the church, I just looked back and said, God, you could do some awesome things through this church. And I feel, if this is where you want us to be, then, great. And so we decided that, we're going to settle in here. But what I appreciate about Pastor Anthony, he just let us set for the next year, and we just healed. There's a lot of scars you deal with, and ups and downs, and a lot of questions. I wouldn't say I was angry a lot. Maybe at first I was, but the longer it went on throughout that year, it's more like, in the middle part of the year, it was more like questioning some things. And then by the end of the year, I was like, those things were starting to break off, and I was starting to feel, like, okay, God, I'm past it. We've talked it through. There's no more to discuss about,
So he never pressured you then about getting in? Because churches are bad about that. I'm bad about that. When I hear a musician is in the door or in the building, I'm like, do they want to play?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you have a minister come in, it's like you want to connect them. You're like, hey, don't sit on the pew.
Yeah.
We're going to put you to work. So kudos to him for giving you the time and space.
Yeah. I appreciate that about him. He didn't rush, but when the year was over, he only let me set a year, which I only needed the year, which was great. He came up and said, okay, what do you feel led to do?
Yeah. Where do you fit in?
Yeah. What do you feel you're called to do? And at that time, she and I, we love young adults. They're like our kids, we love pouring. We love seeing them grow. We love seeing them develop. We love seeing them. They have so many questions from that high school age. When they come out of high school and they go to that college age, they have so many questions. They're trying to find God.
That transition.
They're trying to just find out who they are as a person. And to be able to have that opportunity just to sit down and talk with them and encourage them and talk life issues with them. And, now that we do it, being able to marry them and walk with them through their life. And, it's been really awesome. So that's what we started out doing. But as you know, my heart's always, again, outreach.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm reading your shirt right now, and it says "Tear the roof off." Luke 5:17-26. Tell us about that.
Well, this was a message God gave me at the beginning of the year, and I was like, well, I didn't know I was going to preach it, when I was going to preach it, because he does that a lot. He'll give me a sermon, and I'll just meditate on it for a while until he says okay. And then I was asked to come speak at Camp Mission, which is a youth camp here locally, and Brian Nashi prayed her do it, and they asked me to come speak, and I'm like, okay, so what am I going to say? And God said, remember that message I gave you? And so I went and I did that message, and it just really resonated. It's been my kind of, I wouldn't say, everyone has like a thing for the year, a motto for the year, but God said this is more than just a motto for you, Taylor. This is something you need to make a part of your life every day. So as you know, that this past scripture talks about the four friends who took their friend to Jesus, and they tore the roof off to get their friend to Jesus. And basically the main thing it is as Christians, we need to do what it takes to get people to Jesus. If we can just get them in front of Jesus and let him do the work. It's not for us to do the work. Our job is just to get them to Jesus any way we can, loving them, being there for them. And the thing is, what I love about the passage of Scripture, God just keeps sharing me more with it, is you notice in the Scripture, the friends never said a word. They just carried their friend to Jesus, and they just did the work.
Because it wasn't about them.
It wasn't about them. It wasn't about them talking or saying things. So that wasn't important. What was important was them getting their friend to Jesus. And you know what? They carried him. Because sometimes we got to carry people to Jesus. We got to do what is necessary. They walked with him, and was there with him, and was there when they lowered him down. And I'm sure they were the biggest cheerleaders when Jesus did his work. But they knew all we got to do is give them to Jesus. And if we would just have that mentality as a church, our job is just to get people to Jesus. My job is not to preach at you and pound you over the head or, do this or that. My job is to love you and encourage you and do what I need to do to get you to Jesus. If it's me just listening to you and praying with you or, taking you somewhere to help you, whatever it is, that's what my job is to do as a Christian.
Not only that, make sure you have friends around you that would do that.
Yes.
What if that guy didn't have those friends?
Yeah, I heard, I think it was Jensen Franklin had a book one time, and in the book he's talking about, you're never going to be on the balcony if you're hanging with basement friends. So never put yourself with people that are going to keep you in the basement. You want friends who are going to put you up on the balcony. And so I think that's important. When you put yourself in contact with who you hanging with. Mm-hmm. And yeah, those four guys, we don't know a lot about them, but they had to deeply care for this man because they were willing to carry him across town, work their way through the crowd and tear open a roof layer by layer and get their friend down to Jesus because they knew if they did, that his life would change. And so I think it's the mentality. So that's just kind of been my thing that God has said, this is what you need to be living by. So when it comes to outreach, that's why I just try to look at that, how can we get people to Jesus? And so being in that realm of it, we started that, I think we've been doing it for 3 years now. She and I have been the outreach pastors there at Abundant Life, and it's been awesome. We have a ministry to the Washington STEM Academy teachers. We take them food. Every week we take snacks to the school for the teachers. We buy them. When they ask us for dinners for parent-teacher conference, we supply that. We supply a gift card every week for them to do their own staff drawing. For them, they choose who they want to draw, and they draw a name out all year long, so they get a $25 Amazon gift card every week for that. And so we just want to be Jesus to them. We're not pounding them over the head. We're just loving them and showing them, hey, people are here. We care for you, and any way we can support you, we're here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So every school needs that.
It does, and that we actually started that ministry. It'll be almost 4 years. I think it'll be 4 years this fall. Since then, last year, some other churches have now starting to take on other schools in Costa County. So it's nice to see other schools. I mean, that's our goal was to see that happen eventually. If we could have got to the size we wanted to do, be able to have the ability to do that. But it's been a great opportunity, and we find every year God opens the door more and more for us to share with the teachers and the staff at Washington STEM, and they're just a great group of people, and we're just blessed to be able to to go in and do things for them.
That's great, because I know the teachers aren't getting near the support and the praise they need.
They go through a lot.
Oh man.
Yeah.
My wife is just now getting to be on one of those parent things on the school thing, and she had mentioned before she's been in some of the break rooms, and there's some alarming things in there. I didn't realize that Warsaw has a flag, teachers can anonymously put kind of like indicators on where they feel the school year is at, and we've just started. We're not even halfway in, and there's some warning signs out there.
We've been contacted by one of our ladies that we met, and she knows. We prayed for her. She's been like our main person we've dealt with since we've been there. And I got an email from her 2 weeks after school started, says, "We need prayer." She said things are rough.
2 weeks in.
2 weeks in. So they're just getting started.
The honeymoon period of the year.
Yeah. So if you're a parent, pray for your kid's teacher. Mm-hmm. Support your kid's teacher. Let them know you appreciate what they're doing. Make sure your kid's behaving. Really, let's be legit. Just
discipline your children.
Discipline your kids. Make sure that they're being respectful of their teacher, because that teacher's dealing with a lot of situations. Because you have kids coming in. Because when we talk to them, you have kids coming in from every walk of life. There's kids that are going through some terrible stuff at their home, and these teachers are like the only person that's there that can have that contact with them. And so we were really, really excited because we were able this year to, for the first time, go in and actually pray over all the teachers.
Oh, so cool.
It was awesome. And, they invited the teachers to, because with today's standards, if you don't want to be here, you can walk out while this time's happening, but we're going to pray, and not one teacher left. So that was cool. And then we sent out an actual survey this year asking teachers for a prayer request. If you have a prayer request, and get more information about them so we can do more things for them throughout the year. And out of 35 surveys we got back, 34 of them had prayer requests on them. And they're not just little prayer requests. We have teachers that have family members dealing with cancer and, have lost loved ones this year. So just being that open to that, just letting them know that, hey, we're here for you. Any way you need us, just let us know. Just call us. Don't hesitate. And so that's been our mentality for the last 3.5 years with them, and it's been a great thing. So outreach is an awesome thing. We love doing that. She and I would love working with Pays 5K, every year. That's just a blessing to us to be able to be a part of that and help Pays' story continue on.
I'll tell you right now, we appreciate you guys so much. I wish every organization had somebody like you and your wife on their team, because you're go-getters. It's a conversation here, and the next conversation, you come back with answers, or we appreciate it so much, and
it's a blessing.
It's so awesome to have you on our team.
It's a great thing, and like you said, I think it has a lot with growing up in a home where you've seen your dad be that way, your mom be that way, and so it's just something that is instilled with us. But I think if the church would just have a heart and a compassion for people more, sometimes we get so selfish in what we want. If it doesn't fit our schedule, we don't have time. We don't want to make time for church too much anymore. Church used to be the center place, and everything just kind of wrapped around it. But now it's just like another spoke in the wheel for people.
Yeah, it gets to be routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our faith shouldn't be routine. It should be something that stands out to people. When people look at us, what are we reflecting to them? Are we reflecting Jesus to them? When they look at us, do they say, man, there's something different about that person? I want to go talk to them. Yeah,
we have to be careful of tradition and that routine, because we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this?
Right. And it can lead people down paths that, they don't want to go. I always tell people, if you've gone to church for 30 years and you're in the same place you were, you should really question that, because we should always be changing. The Bible talks about from glory to glory, but every level we should be leveling up. I think we should be, as Christians, the longer you're in and walking with God and serving God, there should be a desire for you to do more. And I'm not saying like spend the entire day at church, I'm talking about, you should have desire to reach people more. You should have desire to be a part of something. Just like I said, just don't come in a set, because for a pastor, that's difficult. Because as we all know, that 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. Well, a lot of times it's the pastor doing a lot of that work because nobody will be there to help them and do things.
It reminds me of that old song, "I Shall Not Be Moved." Yeah. Because every church has that, "I shall not be moved." No, they don't. They don't get up. They don't move.
Yeah.
And then as a pastor, you're sitting there going, "How am I going to make them move?
Yeah.
What do I need to say to make them jump? What do I need to say to make them
Yeah.
get in?
Yeah, and it's difficult. And you're not going to make a move if they don't want to. You can't move them. Only they can by being obedient to God. And, we've talked, before with our leadership, our staff. That's why I appreciate our staff meetings at church are different because our staff meetings just all of our ministry leaders. So they have the deacons, they all meet separate from us. They talk business, but we talk nothing but ministry. And, we talked about sometimes you got to have a blood and, transfusion in the church because people get stuck in their ways, and you got to show people. And sometimes when you make changes, people don't like changes. We just went through a process at our church, with carpet, chairs, making it more friendly, but also be able to do more ministries. This will allow us to do a lot more outreach type stuff and more ministry stuff in the church. But you have people that are negative and like, well, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to change to chairs from pews? You have that.
Don't get me started on that right now. Oh my word!
But I mean, it's
not for you.
Exactly. You know what? And what's cool about our church, I think, and it's amazing. Even our pastor's like, I'm just dumbfounded. He said, I'm just dumbfounded about how this works out. But he said, there are let's see, there are like 4 other former pastors in that church that are serving in ministry, helping.
That pastored that church, or
pastored
others?
Other churches.
Okay.
And some
so
are
that's
older.
Where they're going.
Yeah, and they come there and they're doing different things. But he's like blown away by that. But we're like, it's about people say, well, how can you do that after being a senior pastor? Well, no, I don't have any. Listen, senior pastor, I give all credit to anyone who's a senior pastor who deals with this stuff. I said, if I could just come in and just preach and teach and do all the spiritual aspect, great. The business side of the church you can keep, and all that other stuff. If I could just pour into people, because there's nothing better than see when people have that aha moment, when they get what you're saying or they get what God's trying to show them and teach them. So it's really been cool to have these different leaders. But one of our older guys, I think he's in his 70s, late 70s. He made that exact statement. He says, it's not about you. Somebody made a comment about it. He said, it's not about us. It's about the people outside who are going to come in this church. We might say, well, it's just chairs, it's just carpet to us or whatever. But to them, it does. It has an impact on what people see when they walk in your door. Do they see a church on the move, or do they see a church that's still stuck in the past? And I think people need to see a church on the move. People want to see. We one time had a speaker come when she and I were at the missionary church before we went into ministry. And he said, if people see things happening on the outside, they know something's happening on the inside. So that's always stuck with us. So when you're working on the outside of the church, trying to make it look nice or whatever, or trying to make your church look nice, that's going to have an impact because people realize that, hey, there's something going on here. They're investing into this church building. They got plans. They know something's about to happen. So, and and what's surprising, we have seen some awesome things happen. I mean, we've seen people come in that wouldn't normally come in that kind of hung around and
because of the new carpet, or
because it does have an impact on people. It does. It literally has an impact on people. So you got people coming in, and they see that because listen, when you go into a church and you see old carpet that's torn, you see old pews that are stained up, what's your thought going to be?
It's a first impression.
Yeah, it's a first impression.
We've all been in those churches that are just dated.
Yeah.
It's like going into a museum.
Yeah, exactly.
And my biggest thing is especially with our church, when someone leaves the church, if it looks the same when they come back, as soon as they put the first foot in the door, they have the same view. I mean, it's the church they left because of a bad reason or something, or a purpose. Yeah. And that bothers me.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be the same church they left.
Yeah.
Because it's not, but it just looks that way. It's the same trim, it's the same carpet.
Yeah.
That is my conversation with the church. And everyone knows my heart on that.
And let me say that God is not in the carpet.
No.
God's not in the chairs.
No.
But like you said, first impressions do matter to people and what people see when they come in, because you want to have that. You want to get them past the foyer, right? You want to get them into.
Yeah, they need to get in to hear the word.
They need to hear the word, and if that stuff's going to be a stumbling block to them, you need to remove that stumbling block.
Yes.
And I think that is sometimes we get stuck in the rut on that, and we don't realize, God doesn't change. The Bible says He's the same
Nope.
yesterday, today, forever. He changes not. But sometimes the way He goes about doing things does change, because you can't do the same thing in 2024 that you did in 1973.
And we're not changing the word. It's
No.
just the way it's delivered.
Right. Right.
Just like this podcast right here.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is touching lives of people that have never walked in a church
Yeah.
or have no desire to walk in a church.
Yeah.
But they'll listen to this
Yeah.
and they'll agree with us. And,
Yeah.
it opens doors, it opens hearts, opens minds.
Yeah. And listen, I grew up, you guys know, we all grew up, Tyler and all of us, we grew up in, the Southern gospel, old school music. And I still love the music. I still listen to it from time to time. But that's not going to reach the younger generation a lot these days.
No.
So the newer worship music, which I absolutely love, the newer worship music and that's out there. Some people get hung up on music. They get hung up on the preacher preaches too long. Hey, you're preaching more than 15 minutes. I can't handle this. But
Yeah, if you're looking for it, you're going to find
you're
it.
going to find in something. But I think when you come to the church, you have to have the mentality. I used to have people call me when we were pastoring in Huntington, say, "Well, what do you have to offer us?" And my response,
What is it are you looking for?
yeah, my response would always, "Well, I have Jesus."
We have the truth.
Yeah. Instead, we should be asking ourselves when we go someplace, "What do I have to offer?" Mm-hmm. What do I have to offer God? What do I have to offer in this church? What can I do in this church? And so, being at the church we're at now, I've never been like, I'm not the type of person ego-wise that I have to be in charge, because quite honestly, we're all ministers of the gospel. He's called us all to minister the gospel. And so I don't have to stand up on the pulpit every Sunday and minister. I have my own ministry helping kids and helping people out in the community. That's what God's called us. But He's also called me to be a support to our pastor. My thing is, I don't want him to ever have to experience what some of the things I've gone through. Even the other pastors I've talked to, we're all in the same thing. We don't ever want him to experience. So we're there to help him, guide him, because we want to see the church be a success. We see the potential of what God can do through Abundant Life. So we know that if we do what God has called us to do, and if people can catch the vision of what's happening in the church, that God can do great things in the community. And I think any church here, I know Tyler here, and the church, what they're doing here, they're changing things up. I see that. I follow the Facebook stuff, and I watch, and it's awesome to see what's happening here. And I believe God's going to do great things. We got a great pastor. Tyler's not too bad either.
He's okay.
Yeah, he's okay. But he's got a nice body. He's like young. He's got some go.
It looks good.
Yeah, but they got good things happening here, and I think they're going to do great in this community.
Absolutely.
And my desire is to see all churches do great.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about my church or your church. It's about the kingdom of God going forward, touching people. And if we get so caught up in my church, your church, then people watch, man. People see that. I work in a field where I work with a lot of atheists and agnostic people because they're scientists. And so sometimes there are those that do go to church that get, but there are some people that really, their view is way different. And so if I'm worried about, my church or that church, and I talk that way in front of them, what are they going to think? So we should be praying for the success of every church, no matter who it is. We need to be praying. If they're preaching the word and ministering the gospel, we need to be, cheering them on and praying for them that they'll be successful in their communities and touching lives. So that's just something I think has been instilled in me. It's not about competition. I used to always tell people, I had a pastor one time, they would ask me, how many people go to your church? How many people come to your church? And honestly, I never took attendance. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Too many to count.
I don't know. But I said, I told him, listen, I'm not here to compete.
Yeah.
I'm here to complete the ministry of Christ. I'm not here to compete with anybody. It's not about this is not a competition. Mm-mm. And I don't know why this mentality with a lot of churches get that it's a competition. It's not a competition. Listen, if people come to my church and they leave and go to your church, they weren't going to be at my church anyways. It wasn't for them. If they're going to their church and they're being involved and they're doing things, awesome, great. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people get hurt over that. They get upset. Well, you're still my people. No, they're not, they weren't your people to begin with. They're God's people. If that's where He's calling them to go, then bless them and send them on. I think you just. I've gone through this evolution of my beliefs. A little bit. I think we talked about this a little bit about the deconstruction thing that's going on around right now, and I said, some people are taking it to the extreme, where they're like deconstruct it so much that God's not anywhere in it whatsoever. But the true purpose of that, we should be, as Christians, should be doing it on a very regular basis. We should be evaluating our walk with God and say, are we in sync with what God is telling us to do? Are we, in order with what His Word is telling us? Are we doing those things? And if we're not, we need to adjust those things so we line more up to what His gospel, what His Word is telling us to do. There's nothing wrong with deconstruction as long as it moves you closer to God.
Yeah.
If it's moving you far away. Yeah.
Some people take deconstruction and demolish.
Yeah.
They get it mixed up.
Yeah, they start listening to people that have been hurt by the church, because I believe that's what all of it is people who's been hurt by the church, and they've got this visual of what the church is, and they've kind of made their own thing about it, and they call it deconstruction. They feel it's a good thing. It can be a good thing if it moves you closer to the cross, if it moves you closer to God and your walk with Him. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you start moving away from that, then you're getting to a point, and that's what I don't want ever to get to that point when I go through things. So number one, you got to let the Spirit lead. You got to listen to what the Spirit's telling you. And if the Spirit's saying that's not right, then, you need to turn around and go the other way. But, pastoring in that role that we're at Abundant Life, God has really taken me down some places and shown me some things. And we have a great team that we work really well together. And, we know who that God has called to be at that church. And as pastors, we support him. Anthony's a great guy. He's an expository preacher. For those of you who don't know what expository, he really expounds on the word. He really brings out a lot of what's happening at that time, and
paints the whole picture.
Yeah, and you guys know me. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of ministers. I listen to a lot of preaching. That's what I do most throughout the day, because I just like to be fed the word. And I like to listen to what other ministers are saying, and I always say he's probably one of the better expository preachers I've heard. Personally, I'm sure there's other ones he would, they're out there, but for me personally, he's probably one of the better ones I've ever heard on his expository preaching. But everyone has different preaching styles. I said I'm not an expository preacher. I'm more like here and the now, what's going on, and that's how I correlate everything about life and what's happening. But we know it's a team effort, and so we all work together. And what I appreciate about him is he allows his ministry staff to lead their ministries. The only thing he says when we have our meetings is, "What can I do to help you?" And that's what you've got to have. That's the attitude you've got to have. You've got to allow your people to lead the ministries. Like I said, just stay to the focus of what the ministry is about, what's our mission, what's our goal here, and stay the course. But, yeah, so I just encourage people just to really support your pastors, because you don't know what they're going through. And if you want your church to be successful, stop complaining, get involved. Because I find most of the complainers are the people who aren't doing anything. And they feel like they can, for somehow they know what God's call is for the church, but yet they don't, you don't see anything coming out of them. There's no fruit coming out of them, And I got to the point in my age, I guess, maybe it's because I'm getting old. Am I old, Tyler?
You are.
Okay. Because of my age, I have a looser tongue with that kind of stuff. And I always tell my pastor, hey, I'll say it. I mean, they're not going to be mad at me. I'm not paid. I'll say what you want me to say. I mean, because people need to hear it. I'll be pretty blunt with people, If you want things to change, then help be a change maker. Be a part of it. Get involved, do stuff. I mean, if you want great children's ministry, help be part of the children's ministry. If you want a great worship team and you have a gift of playing music, then get on board, play music. If you have a heart for outreach ministry and you think we need to do more, to become a part. I always tell people I got plenty of outreach stuff we want to do. There's more stuff we want to do in our community this year. Other stuff besides what we're doing. So. I want people to know that we're in the community to love people and, encourage people. So instead of complaining, take part. Be someone who takes action and be a part of church. I know the pastors are listening to me right now. Are like, preach it, brother. I mean, because because we want to see our people. We want to see the church succeed. I mean, they're not there just to preach and get a paycheck. I pastored for 10 years and never took a paycheck from the church. I was a bivocational pastor. I always wanted the money to stay in the church. But there's pastors that do it full time, and they don't just do it just to get paid. They're doing it because they love people. We're supposed to take care of our preachers and our ministers. That's our responsibility. But they want to see people come to a closer walk with God. They want to see people do great things for God. And my dad always said he'd rather have one person on fire for God than 100 dead people in the church. So. I think it's a true statement.
It is very true.
So, yeah.
That's great, man. We appreciate everything you said today and sharing your heart and sharing your story. And we just appreciate you being on the podcast. We definitely want to have you back.
There is a CCCC.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you like that 3, though.
Okay. We can edit that.
We won't.